we are going to just kind of roll right through this because time is an issue, and I want to make sure that you guys get the most out of it. So this session is just storytelling. It's telling and building a story through still photography, and specifically with the iPhone. There are lots of ways to do it. There are lots of techniques and tools that are out there. I'm going to give you what's been working for me and some of the little tricks and things I have found about my iPhone that I don't think a lot of people know about. And to help you out with this, I've created a URL on my webpage. You can download the slides there, and there is a video that I will be showing some part of my process because I found it was easier to pre-record part of this class, the actual how-to part on the iPhone, and post it as a video, which also will show and narrate during the class. And then also a quick video on my favorite photo editing app for the post-production part of this. And so let me go ahead and just type that into the chat real quick, just to make sure everybody has it. All right, and so again, there'll be the slides and other resources will be there. You can just go to the chat and grab that link for after the class. And so I am a big fan of photography. I am one of those guys who just opens up an art book and looks through it, or will stop. I love Instagram. Generally speaking, well, I used to love Instagram. Let me just back up for a minute. I love Instagram when we actually used it for sharing photos. I don't like it so much that we're now using it for advertising and talking about what we do throughout the day. And here's a picture of my new listing. I don't need to really know what everybody's doing at work during the day. But I do love to see those captured moments from friends and family's life to keep up to date with them. And I think that everybody here on this call knows that the power of visual art or communicating an image can have an impact on people. It can resonate and connect with them in a way that most other venues that we may use don't. This particular program, this particular webinar is talking about connecting with our consumers using a photo and taking it with our iPhone. Now, I want to be real clear here that this is not necessarily going to be very in-depth. It's not going to be super technical. I'm going to go over a few basics to help you use your iPhones better. And the reason we don't do this class, in case someone's asking, I want everybody to note that Jay and Abby, who are the biggest supporters of their Android phones for so long, are in this class today, both with iPhones. Thank you so much for joining us. So we talk about the story, the power of story. This previous photo that I showed just a moment ago was actually my daughter and I on her wedding day a couple months ago. She came back and visited this weekend, and God, I couldn't wait to get rid of her. Maybe it was the two of them. I don't know. But we spent a couple of days for her birthday up there. And it just reminded me actually when she came home that the last time I really got to hang out with her was when that photo was taken. We get to tell stories as agents all the time. We can talk about a listing, and that's great, but kind of everybody does that. We can talk about our community. We can talk about lifestyle. We can talk about things that interest us. And these stories that we tell need a home. And for the most part, we're using social media to tell this, and largely Instagram is the best place to tell these stories, where you can just put a photo and a brief description. And we do other sessions. Angel and her team does other sessions on using Instagram for marketing. But that is the one place where I found the best connection with these photos. Second to that is Facebook. And again, this is the concept of telling stories with these items, which I'll get into more in just a bit. The other place that I have found value in these photos has been something simple. I love using Google Local Guide. It's a free way to give reviews of certain things around town, certain businesses, or anything from the hiking trail to a business or restaurant that you go to. And taking good photos is what gets attention to those reviews. And the magic of the Google Local Guide is the more content you give, the more often your face pops up. And if someone who is connected with you somehow in this world is looking at that business, Google Local Guides will typically put your reviews higher because you know each other, but also the businesses tend to connect and resonate with them. So there's more than just one use outside of social media for the photos that you're taking around town. And the iPhone itself is a media tool. We can do great videos and we can do good photos on there and audio storytelling and a whole bunch of other things that can be done. And I've chosen this tool because it's one I know. I don't teach a class on the Android because I would have to go learn a bazillion different models of them because none of them seem to be the same. And so it's easier for us to focus on this one device here in this particular program. I do want to make clear that this class is not to teach you to take listing photos with your iPhone. That's not what it was designed for. It doesn't have the depth and the feature set that you need to actually take listing photos. This is for storytelling, things on the go, different marketing pieces that you're going to collect and share. Taking photos for a listing requires the right gear, that someone has trusted you to get the best photo, best elements of that house out into the public. And if you are not someone who's invested in the proper equipment or time to learn to use it, then you need to hire somebody to do that. So this is more just, again, about that social story. So I want to share with you a couple quick stories from my own iPhone. Generally, these photos come from 3 or 4 different iPhone versions there. I'll be focusing on 11 and 12 the iPhone 11 and 12 a little later, but for now, some of these were taken on anything from 10 to the phone I have now. And I'll tell you some quick stories about this. This was actually from an airplane flying over somewhere in the US, going out west. I have no idea where I was. I looked out the window and the sun was coming up, and it had this really cool blue line across the back in the horizon, and then it had this really neat area. And I posted it on Reddit, and it was immediately taken down because someone thought I took a picture from the Mars rover and posted it claiming my own. So the story of me flying from an airplane is that somebody apparently thought this was from Mars. So at least somebody noticed. They created their own story about it being a Mars photo, and apparently I was claiming a NASA photo as mine. This is me driving across the state of South Dakota. I was teaching for a week there, and I posted this picture. And I didn't give any context. I just posted it. I was like, hey, driving into the sunset or whatever I said on there. And immediately somebody said, I think that's South Dakota. Somebody actually in my sphere took that simple of a photo and remembered that sunset, that flatness, that road, somehow knew where I was. And it was the first photo I'd taken. And they weren't even in real estate, so I had no idea what I was doing. This is telling the story of me who used to hate cats. Now I'm not so much hating cats anymore. Now, this is all storytelling. Look, there's no context to this, but if you look at that on my social sphere, you can say clearly Matthew doesn't hate cats any longer if you've known. This is a sunset in Miami. I think most can connect with this. Most can connect with Christmas time or the dog or both. Even something as basic as an alleyway in Chicago makes people stop and look at this, because what they're seeing all day in the Instagram thread are people's memes, people's passive aggressive nature, my new home for sale. And then they see something where they have to stop and take a look at it for a minute. That may not have any context for the person who's viewing it, but yet it got a lot of likes and attention because of the composition and because it was just a neat photo. Again, another picture of me hating cats, because this is her barbecuing herself. So, I mean, cats are pretty dumb. Anyways. And this is a photo that my daughter and I took when my daughter and I were walking through. I just want to give you a quick background on this. This is, of course, on William Street in Fredericksburg, right next to Castiglia's. And we're walking by and we have camera gear. I was taking her out and showing her how to use a DSLR camera. And I quickly grabbed it on my iPhone because I just wanted to have a reference photo, and then took it with my regular DSLR and actually liked the iPhone photo better. The clouds coming in over top, making the lights pop. And then of course people, can see that and connect somehow with shopping, or they know that area, they point it out. This is stopping at, I think it's called Capitol Burger, as my youngest daughter and I were going to the museum and then sharing a lunch. And I just wanted to stop here to talk about this particular element of storytelling. I know a lot of people are like, Instagram or Facebook, I just want to see what anybody else is eating. There are people who do want to know the story behind the food. Hey, McKinley and I stopped off here on the way to the art museum in Richmond. This was our first time eating out in a long time. First time, certainly for the two of us, in the middle of actually, yeah, pretty much towards the end of our first round of COVID. And I posted this photo, and the conversation wasn't about the hamburger. By the way, if you're not putting a fried egg on your hamburger, I don't even know what you're doing with your life. But that was what somebody pointed out, and that started a whole dialogue about fried egg on hamburger. It was about escaping what was going on for people at the moment. It was being in a restaurant. It was the boardwalk fries. It was the hamburger. It was whatever. But the story I said is, this is the first time Kinley and I have been out to a museum in a while. And then the comments that come back are about going out to the museum. It's about enjoying life and changing what we were doing and focus at the moment. This is at a vineyard and orchard where I met what would eventually be my middle daughter's future husband, or current husband, I guess, her first husband. Calm down. And anyways, and then this is us at that particular vineyard or orchard. And it's just a moment that you catch to talk about what you're going on, to get people's attention, to drive what you're doing. This, of course, connects with people who, at the time when it's snowing, icy, you feel immediately cold when you see these. These things have some type of connection that people can deal with. This is my youngest daughter and I, as we just took out a mafia hit on somebody. I don't know what was going on there. But there were lots of comments about this, and lots of people who had their own backstory as soon as it was posted. But these little things that connect with people give them the opportunity to either connect with a story or share their own. This is actually right down the street from Latana's house in King George. We were there for Christmas Eve, walking. I was walking my dog down there and saw the most random, like, street light and chair is just in the middle of this long stretch of nothingness in the back of the, or in the front of the subdivision. And I took a picture, and I kind of liked how it turned out. And so I posted it, and you can see I captured this while walking jet. If this were the opening scene of a story, what would happen next? There are comments after comments after comments of people who started writing their own story about it. And so that, it's just, again, it's a way to get people to stop what they're doing, stop the bothers of the world, and focus on something where it's a social connector. And so each of those photos I just showed you, as you looked at them, even with very little context, you related to something in your life, either the orchard and vineyard, and you thought about going out to the winery last weekend, or me staying with the daughter, and she's, my daughter, and we had a mafia hit, and you're like, I remember Sopranos. Sopranos was a great show. Each one of those things that I intentionally went through quickly, if you were paying attention to them, triggered some related memory or thought or environment or something. When I got to Castiglia's, half of you were like, you know what, it is time to go out for a drink tonight, because you had some type of connection with it. And again, this story kept on going. And then eventually people actually started adding to other people's stories, which was kind of cool. And then there is a batch photo telling. And so those photos were all singular photos that were used to get someone to trigger in on something that they related to it, some social connector. Batch storytelling, or visual storytelling, in this case, was I took a number of photos about Fredericksburg that I had collected for a while. Some of them I'd already posted, but I put them together in a collection. And I talked a little bit about, this was 6-7 months into kind of people being locked down and such. And we started talking about the local area, about Fredericksburg. And again, using appropriate hashtags, bringing people locally back in and back connected, started a conversation and a dialogue about the area. And it was just a collection of local photos. And it was, for me, a reminder about what people really wanted to connect with. And again, these are just some of the photos that they saw. So those photos, and again, I go through those quickly because I wanted you to start seeing that you were building your own story. Now, stories have 3 elements. Freytag tells us that stories has three elements. The first one is the exposition. Why am I here? What does it matter? Where is that? And so when you're placing someone in the story, you notice that I use some of those elements were just a long road at sunset, the beach in Miami with the sun going down. They really didn't need to have too deep of an exposition. The picture picture itself was attractive enough to trigger something about storytelling. The second part of a story, or the second part of that first element of exposition is sometimes I have to tell them why these things matter. So when I have a random collection of Fredericksburg photos all over the different seasons and times and places, I need to tell people the reason I am posting this is because this is a reflection of our area and, growing up here and whatever. So you have exposition. The second one you have is a climax. What's the most important part of the story or element? And even that picture that is in the back alley of Chicago may not mean something to someone who's never been to Chicago or a big city, but it still has a factor of what is going on in that. What is the back of that building? What is actually the pretext for this? There is a point where someone gets interested to either create their own story if you haven't given them one, or to understand your story, the most important part of the climax. And then there's the denouement, the end of the story about what do I do next with this, the happily ever after or the end or whatever it is. Now, when you're constructing stories, especially with visual elements, you can't always assume they're going to be one and done. Like the continuity of photos that you see in most of my Instagram photos, or even those batch photos that I post out there, or some related tour to what we are trying to guide them through. So it could just be all about Fredericksburg. It could be about outdoorsmanship. It could be about a number of different things. They don't all have to be done one at a time. What you're doing is constructing a series of social connectors with the consumers who are sharing and following you on social media. If every photo you are posting is a review, a positive review you got, a meme about how you're out there in the grind and crushing it in real estate, a photo of your new listing, then the story, the social connector is, yes, you're a real estate agent, but all you're doing is sharing what you do at work all day. You're not showing about the love you have for community or your family or dogs or cats or seasons or whatever it is. And so you have to remember that people are not taking just the moment of the photo, but the totality of your photo telling elements to get them engaged with who you are as a brand. As business people, as real estate agents, we are a brand. And so what we say, what we do, it's not just the one moment in time, it is all of these things. And so if they are continuously connecting with us over local awesomeness, over pets, over outdoorsmanship and camping or fishing or whatever you do in life, that is a much deeper and more memorable engagement with you as a brand than just yet another listing. And so when we do that, we want to make sure we're getting their attention, and good photography is going to get the attention so you can use those type of storytelling elements to talk about who you are. It starts with being able to see that final shot before you hit the shutter button. And so the shutter button has a couple of different elements here. I'm going to show you some screenshots in a minute. But if you're looking at your phone, the shutter button is there either at the bottom of it, or you can use the volume up or down buttons as shutter buttons, which again, I'll go through in just a minute. But that means I want to look through the lens of the camera. And you'll see a lot of people doing this. They're looking over the camera, down at the camera, up and around the camera to see what all is going around, when really you should only be looking at the viewfinder on your camera to say, what is this picture actually going to look like? Not just hitting the shutter button quickly, but taking a breath and going, what will this look like at the end when I edit it or when I post it? While we're looking through that, we start off with lighting. Lighting is probably one of the biggest elements that is going to differentiate a good photo from a bad photo. So if you look at this photo, the one on the left with Kinley and I, the sun is coming from overhead and behind, which gives a little bit of this halo effect. And if you look at Kinley, it makes her hair look more frizzy than it really is. And so when you see that frizzy hair look, or you see like the darkness in our faces and that backlighting on there, that's not the greatest photo. That's not the biggest, it's not the best focus point you're going to get. But if you look at the photo on the right-hand side where it's Kinley and I, these are a couple weeks apart, but the sun is actually coming down and hitting our faces. Even though this is unfiltered, this is not us, we didn't do anything for that photo. This was just a moment in time we were taking. It's a much better looking photo. That darkness just puts a different feel to the photo in general. Lighting is pretty important. So when we're looking at lighting, we're looking at a couple phrases you may hear photographers use. The best lighting is typically the golden hour, 1 hour before sundown, 1 hour after sun up. That hour before or after gives you very often the best lighting. Again, here am I on the beach. That light is kind of hitting just right, the morning light after a run on the beach. And it just has a better feel for the lighting than if it was dark. And then the same thing for sunset. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. We want to try to match the direction of the light, whether you're using artificial light or whether you're using natural sunlight. Now, in general, especially on your phone, there's going to be very few places or time where you're going to find anything better than natural sunlight. Natural sunlight is almost always going to be the best lighting that you have. Now, there's more advanced stuff that we talk about lighting when we do videos and things like that, but when we're talking about on-the-go lighting, whether you're doing selfies or pictures of people, you always want to have the light source behind you. So if you are doing sunlight, you want to have the sun coming from behind you as the photographer. If you're indoors, you want to have whatever the major light source is coming from behind you. And so it's not backlighting people like I showed you. So again, you're going to match the direction of the light whenever you can. On your phone, there are a couple different cameras and elements that may seem confusing. Now, there is the, sorry, yep, somebody wasn't able to get in. Hold on one second. Okay, there you go. So when you're looking at the camera, and this is the Pro version of your iPhone camera. The Pro version has 3 lenses. The standard version, I think, has 2. You have, first of all, the little circle there at the top right-hand corner, the way it's facing you, I think it's the right-hand corner where it's facing you, is the flash. Say it with me. Flash is bad. Flash is horrible. Like, have you ever been at a concert and somebody keeps taking photos, but they're using flash? It's not a strobe light. It's not cool. It just makes everything look bad. Flash doesn't really work too well in most environments there. If you need it, and you try it with every photo you take with flash, take another photo without it. A lot of people try to do it to lighten up, and I'm going to show you in a little bit how you actually do that without the flash so that your photos look better. The flash typically gives a lot of fake and false light, and it has very limited use on an iPhone for the stuff we're talking about. The bottom little dot underneath the bottom camera is the microphone. So if you're trying to figure out, why you have muffled sound because you're holding your hand over or thumb over the microphone. And then you have 3 lenses. The wide angle lens is the top, the macro rather, the telephoto lens, the small detail lens is in the bottom, and then the right-hand side is the ultra wide lens. What that translates to is when you are opening up your camera, you notice at the bottom of the shutter button, there is a 0.5x, a 1, and a 2, those 3 little circles. Those little circles are telling you which of the lenses on the back you're actually using at that moment. Now, what a lot of people will do, sorry, jumped ahead here. What a lot of people will do is when they're taking photos, how many of you do this? And you take and you pinch your phone in and out to zoom in and zoom out of what you're taking a picture of, right? So what's happening is that you're thinking, now think about these photos. Each of these photos have these little boxes called pixels. They're little dots or little squares, however I think about pixels being little squares, but they could be they're little dots. When you take your fingers and move in and out, what you're doing is spreading those pixels out so it actually downgrades your photo. It makes it blurry. It's not as crisp and clear. It is, I'm not sure. Well, I do know. So the pinching in and out to zoom in and out of your subject was what iPhone did and what Android did before they had multiple camera lenses on there. So people got in the habit of pinching in and out to make picture zoom in and out, and it doesn't work very well. It actually breaks down and distorts the actual final photo. What you should be doing is using or choosing manually which one of these 3 lenses you want to use to bring the picture in so that the lens is doing the work instead of pixelating and stretching out digitally that particular photo. And what you'll find, especially in your iPhones, if they're 10 through 12, versions 10 through 12 or model 10 through 12, that picture is way better than you think it is, even at a distance. You can edit it and crop it after you've taken the photo without having the same degradation the breakdown of the pixels in the photo. So you want to choose between the 3 lenses to find the one that matches, with the 2 times being that macro feature where you're right up on top of it. On the front of your camera, looking at you, if you tilt it just so, you can see the little elements inside of the glass there. Those elements, the 2 on the left, are sensors. They are sensing light and they are sensing focus points for your composite of your photo there. The middle bar is your microphone, and to the right of that bar is the actual camera you see. To the right of that camera, there's another small circle called a dot projector. The dot projector is how you get facial recognition on your phone to open up your phone through there. So I was watching somebody do this the other day. They were holding their phone with their thumb over the camera and saying, "Why can't it log in?" I don't know who would do that. Like, that is the weirdest place to put your hand when you're trying to use your phone. But when you're looking at those dots, you only have one camera on the front. This is important for you because you're not going to get those different levels of frame. You're not going to get the wide, ultra wide, and macro or telephoto lens on the front of this. This is really only for your face. This is only for doing selfies or FaceTime videos. And so because it only has one purpose, it doesn't have the largeness of the lenses or some of the other feature there. If you're doing video, for example, you want to use this side of the camera when you're just putting on like doing a professional photo. This is not as good a camera as the ones back here that iPhone will use on your video to do different composites. And so if you're actually trying to take a more professional shot of yourself, this is for on-the-go selfies and things. These lenses are better. So if you are trying to do video or take some type of, like, again, more professional photo, you want to make sure you're using that size, put in the tripod. If you have an Apple Watch, your Apple Watch has a shutter on it, so you can control your phone, both video and photography, on the Apple Watch at a distance. It also has timers and things that I'll show you in just a bit. Now that you have a little bit of an understanding about the physical part of the phone and which parts do what, there are some other features on the phone that go hand in hand with good photography. The next thing outside of light is the rule of thirds. So rule of thirds gives you this grid of 9 boxes, right? You can see that the 1 box is in the middle, and then you've got the different sides here. The rule of thirds is to help you structure what you want your photo to look like. And so remember what I said, you want to envision what that end result photo is going to be as you look through the lens in your camera. The rule of thirds lets you help divide your photo into different elements to tell you to talk about what's going on. Notice that the subject of this photo is me. It's a selfie. The subject of the photo is me, but the activity, the story behind it is that I'm getting ready to go up on this little death plane to go flying with a friend. And so notice that 2/3 of my photo is actually the plane, because that's a core element of the story, and I'm on one side of it to talk about the subject of it. When I take away those middle bars, you can see it's in thirds, with the majority on 1/3 and then the plane in the other 2 portions. This photo is actually just a barn photo, but notice that the door is to the left, the center is your eye starts to go, and then the right is the other part of that spool. So really you're looking at 3 different photo composites here, and your rule of thirds is which element is the most important. Notice that the spool is closest to me and it's offset to one side. That is going to be again, that's going to be the element that I really want them to focus on. There's no story between the door and the spool. It's just the composition looked good, and it was an old barn. And I think light coming through the slats with being backlit by the sun is typically something we would see for an old barn story. You can turn this on in options and in settings. So when you go into settings in your phone, You're going to scroll down to grid and turn that on. That is going to help you align your photo so you know which portion of the thirds it is. If you look at most photos that you like of just about anything, it's generally you are off to one side or the other. But typically being straight on does not have the most appealing view of your subject, right? You want that back behind the story, behind the subject element in your stories, and your grid will help you align with those. You also have perspectives, which will help tell stories. And again, some of this stuff, once you hear it and once you see it, you'll start noticing it more in more infamous photos. And so the first two photos are mine. I honestly grabbed the third one just for perspective. I have no idea where that even is. On the left, this is a church downtown. You can notice the storm coming up about it. And this is actually legitimately kind of kneeling down and pointing the phone up. Low angle photos gives you the feeling of bigness, of something impending or something happening that's large. It's the point of view is basically that of a child. It brings awe to you, either how big the Ferris wheel is in Chicago, how big the building is that you may be shooting, commercial building, how that storm clouds, how it looks looming over top of the church. Low angle builds awe. And so again, it's okay to get a little low, point that camera up, take a quick photo at that up angle. The high angle is the opposite, that you are up somewhere. So if you're downtown standing up top, you'll see lots of photos of people on the garage, the parking garage downtown with the cityscape behind them, because that high angle makes them look like you're seeing over their shoulder and down into a city, giving your subject a little bit more, I guess, authority or grandeur, so to speak. So low angle is typically giving the awe effect of whatever it's looking up at. High angle is making the subject, be the person, the point of view who's taking it, or the subject, be more important than looking down on everything else. I just happen to like this particular photo. This is a Chicago. This is at the top of that Ferris wheel you saw in the last photo. And then you have lateral movements. Now, this is actually a panoramic. This is down to the Rappahannock River while I was fishing. But lateral movement is going to be when you take a picture from different angles of the same subject. So the center you can see here. In this case, we cheat a little bit using the iPhone because we can do the panoramic and stand in one place. But generally speaking, you would move to the left, the right, and the center of whatever subject it was and take those photos to see which element you have. Notice that where this one lands, I am not in the center of Rappahannock River taking the photo. I'm in a lateral perspective. I'm the right lateral, taking a picture from an angle. And so that just, the composite of this is just, for me, it was just better. I just really liked how that bend came about in the river. I took that from all three positions and then chose the one that I most wanted to share with everyone. And then you have the very typical point of view. This is, again, camping, reading a book. Unlike most people, I like to go camping and then figure out how to do it. So lots of point of view photos that you'll see. Very often you'll see, especially for real estate agents, taking a picture of a drink with the back being the pool they're sitting next to, or the bar that they're at, or like the food. They're looking at their food and you can see the restaurant behind them. That's a point of view or POV photo. That point of view photo helps your viewer put themselves in your shoes, so to speak. Whereas everything else is to maybe telling the story about you, or like me getting ready to get on the plane was telling them what I'm getting ready to do. The POV shows you what I am looking at, what moment I'm in at the time. All of these perspectives help you tell whatever story you're trying to tell. Those perspectives are to reinforce the fact that people who are looking at photography, they want their eyes to be told where to go. No one wants to look at a photo and try to figure out where Waldo is, right? Unless that's your game, and that's fine if you want to spend time doing that. When you're taking your photo, you want the viewer to be able to know exactly where they're looking and what to be looking at. So this is, this is another picture on travel. I don't remember where I was. Oh, this is all, I don't know. Anyways, right now you can see that as the photographer, I want you to look off into the distance. That's what I am telling your eyes to look at. I'm not telling you to look over here at the ice sitting on the water, not even the big sky. Although, again, if you're looking at the rule of thirds, notice that I've given 2/3 of this photo to the sky, right? The top 2/3 of that photo is to the sky, because remember, giving lots of sky shows the awe, the enormity of it. And so showing a distance and making your eyes focus here makes it seem very large in the photo. That the openness is very big because I gave lots of sky in the top 2/3, and then I gave you a smaller focus point in the back to kind of lead you down this vantage point. As I said earlier, golden hour is very important. This is actually sun up at a creek behind one of our listings. I almost died almost falling into the creek. It was very cold out there that day, but you can't tell that from the photo. I could not let that go for a moment. I love sunrises with reflection on the water. But anyway, so this is the golden hour that morning, that coming up. If I had taken that same photo in that same place an hour later, all it would have looked like was just a regular old creek bed, a muddy creek bed with the winter foliage, winter trees there over top. So the hour in which you take photos is very important. Now, I mentioned this also, as I said earlier, you want professional photography equipment and DSLRs and things to take listing photos. However, I think most of you do. If you're doing a market analysis, you're going to drive by the property. If you're waiting for photos to be done or whatever it is that you're doing, in most cases, knowing what direction your subject is, in this case, your home, matters. If I have a professional photographer out there and the front of my home is facing where the sun is coming up, I'd rather photos be done early morning to get the best natural light on the front of that house, and then vice versa in the evening. Whatever, generally speaking, you're going to get the best front photos of your listing or outside photo of your listing based on the direction of the sunlight that day. And so if you pay attention to that when you're taking the listing, or even ask the seller if they know, that may be a better idea of when you're going to schedule your photographer a morning or evening based on when natural light is hitting the house the best. But also just other objects. That first hour in the morning, first hour in the evening, or last hour in the evening is important. We also deal with depth in our photos. And again, when you're using the iPhone, it will automatically do some of this for you. It actually makes it so much easier. I'm not going to get into ISO and f-stop and all that because that's a little beyond this session, but those are things that would factor into this. The iPhone kind of automatically does this stuff for you in a lot of cases. So this is just on my kitchen counter, just a drink, and you notice that the drink is clear. Everything else in the back is not. It's not focused. That is to give that feeling depth. It feels like the bottle is closer to you because it's not all flat. And so when you are trying to adjust, I'm going to show you in just a second how to do this on the phone. When you're looking at your photo and you want to adjust to it, you want to make sure that you are tracking the subject of the photo, in this case, the whistle pig bottle and the glass, so that it appears to be more straightforward, more clear, and then everything else is unfocused in the back. That's what they talk about when they talk about the depth of a photo. And again, you can do the same thing with your selfies. Notice that this is an Apple store in Chicago. I am the subject of the photo, where I'm doing and where I am. And again, remembering the 2/3, so it's offset over my shoulder. This, by the way, is the coolest classroom I've ever seen. Wouldn't you guys love to sit on wooden crates with a big window and the Lake Michigan behind you at an Apple store with a big window? It's awesome. I'm trying to get Kevin to let me build this. Hasn't gone so well so far, because then we have to put in water. It's a whole thing. But I really love the Apple stores when they do their classes and stuff. And so that was a story that was being told that day. But the depth is, notice that he's actually teaching about how to do iPhone photography. But the secondary part of the story is where I am, which is the classroom at an Apple store. I'm the subject as the person in the selfie. Using macros also helps you. That is the lens I showed you earlier, that the 2x lens. iPhone does this exceptionally well. Because you're through Zoom looking at a slide, you're not going to see it as well. But this is actually blossoming apple tree in the backyard, where if you could see it on your phone or on the monitor, not through Zoom, you could actually see all the water droplets on this and coming down off this pedal underneath of it. It's holding water. Again, being shot on an iPhone is remarkable, the detail that you will get on these photos. And being able to tell somebody, hey, you know, my apple tree is blossoming in the backyard, again, is going to be that social connector with people. I come back, remember the story has longevity. I can tell the second part of the story later. These are the apples actually coming in again. And then lastly, this was at my daughter's wedding, and we did these little personal boxes, charcuterie boxes, not really charcuterie, but that was the intent. And notice I didn't need the big view from behind, just the corner and the food kind of tells you what else is on there, and it gives you a little depth because the corner is my focus point here, and then everything else is a little defocused behind it. So that's an example of the macro photos where you can take a picture of something up close. Again, I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. Something that a lot of people talk about is HDR photos. And for those who've been around real estate for a while, you know, this was HDR, like that big thing that kind of came out in 2007 and 8 that everybody was doing. And your iPhone has a feature that does HDR. It's preset for most of you, but you can turn it on or off depending on what you want. What HDR does is essentially take three shots of the same photo simultaneously. So it's the underexposed, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner here where it's just very dark and mixed, the neutral exposed with a little bit of brightness and light, and then the overexposed, a lot of brightness and white. And then it merges those three together and brings out the best color or examples. The computer decides what this HDR photo is going to look like. So your iPhones have an HDR feature in there. I think it's just fine for most of your outside shots. It doesn't, in my opinion, composite well or build well for interior shots. And so I have mine turned off because I would rather do post editing with it. The iPhone does take high quality pictures where you have a lot to work with when you are editing it afterwards. Not going to spend a lot of time here other than telling you this is great for outside in nature. I don't think HDR really works really well for interior shots or selfie photos. And then long exposure. So this is a picture of just a regular old creek bed, but if you notice that water seems very smooth, see how it all seems to be running together. And essentially what's happened is you have in your camera, in your lens, you have the eye of the camera, so to speak. And what happens when you do long exposure is you're just holding that eye open a little longer than normal. When you hit the shutter button, it takes the picture and it closes and gets the picture real well. When you do long exposure, it's holding it open. When you choose long exposure, and there is a feature on the iPhone to do that, when you choose long exposure, you have to have an incredibly steady hand or tripod that's not moving because it's holding the iris of the camera open longer. That means any movement is making everything blurry, and you don't really want that. You want what is moving to be blurry, not the whole shot. But that's what you see long exposure, and yes, your phone does it. This is an example. This is me running water out of the hose in the front yard with just a regular photo. This is me using the long exposure feature on the camera to smooth out that water. Notice at the bottom on the right-hand side of the photo, notice at the bottom that the nozzle's a little blurry. It's because I was holding the camera, and any slight movement makes your thing blurry. But the water itself, that long exposure is what it's supposed to look like, looks much better than the sprinkler. It looks like it's sputtering out with all the sprinkles over there. And again, in just a second, I'm going to show you. So if you want HDR, if you do want those three photos to be taken at the same time, you have to remember you can't just snap and shoot on your phone. You have to take the picture and relax a second before you remove it because it's building that HDR. If you've taken a photo on your iPhone and it just seems to pause for a second and build like the slow blossom of a photo, it's building the HDR. Smart HDR says the computer on the iPhone is going to do the work. It's what's going to actually build what it thinks is best version of those three neutral, high, and low exposure photos to build for you. So you can turn that on or off in your camera settings. Also in your camera settings, you can choose the format. Most of the time, I suggest that everybody uses high efficiency. This gives you the best possible photo version of what you have without any editing and shifts. So when you go into your settings and under camera, you're going to click on formats and then choose high efficiency. It gives you both for video and camera, it gives you a very good photo, but it also does it in the smallest possible size. So you can get as many as you need on the camera. I know some of you don't like deleting photos from your camera for years and years and years, and they start to build up and then you run out of space. This will make it the most composite, whereas most compatible just says it doesn't care about size. It just cares about what kind of picture you're taking. I haven't seen anything other than they just get too big. So I would go with high efficiency. The next setting we talk about is preserve settings, and this is a big one for me. How many of you have had a picture emailed to you, and when you open it up, it's like this briefest of a second, it's like a video as it focuses in? You guys seen those? Those are the live photo. I hate this feature with a passion because it catches a brief second of sound and it moves. It's got this moving photo thing, and it's also a super big file. What preserving the settings means is that when I go into my photo, my camera, and I say, okay, I want to turn the flash off and I want to turn live photo off, then the next time when I close the app, it'll save those settings. If you do not have preserve settings set the way that is on the screen, then it resets to default every time you open and close the app. And so your favorite features or the thing that you did last isn't preserved, it isn't saved. And so in your iPhone, you want to go in there and say, yes, I want to preserve settings in camera mode, and then choose, make sure that that little toggle button is green, the live photo. So if I turn off live photo, and I close my app, it remains off until I go to turn it on. There are one or two instances that I will show you in a minute where live photo is a benefit to what we do, but generally it's not. It takes up too much space on your phone. When the person receiving it sees that brief moment of sound and things, it makes them have to shift their thought instead of just looking at the photo. So I like to turn that off. The other camera settings to pay attention to is use volume up for burst. So on your phone, there are two little buttons here, right? These are your volume up and volume down buttons. When you turn volume up for burst, that means I can hold down the up volume button in the camera mode, and it just keeps taking photos until I tell it to stop. So as long as I hold it, it's taking photos. So if I am taking photos of something moving, if I'm taking pictures of kids playing or an animal running around or whatever, something moving, I'm going to hold down that button so it takes a bunch of photos. On the iPhone, in the iPhone or the photo app, it'll hold all of those pictures in one place. You'll see like 47 or 48 or whatever, the number on it. You click that, it'll open up all those photos you did in a burst, and you can pick the ones that you think most likely reflect what you wanted to show. So if you are doing action shots, burst mode is very good. Otherwise, the button, the down volume is your single shot button. So I can push down once on the volume down button and it acts like a camera. So if I'm doing this and I'm holding up laterally, I can push down on the button and it takes a picture instead of using the button here. One thing to remember when you're doing that is to be very careful. You don't need to push hard. And what happens is people will push down on their phone. And the reason that they actually chose the volume down button is it's closer to the center point of the phone. If you do the burst, you tend to move your phone down, so you get a little bit of, you're not balanced. So that's why they chose the photo middle button, is that you're less likely to move your camera when you push the button down. You don't have to push very hard. It'll work just fine. The next setting in camera settings is mirror the front camera, and I personally have this turned off. So mirror the front camera rearranges the photo. So if you are doing a selfie or FaceTime video or something, if the left side of your face is the left side of your face, it looks like a mirror, so it's reversed. If you leave that off, then it's actual real time. So if you go to move, something's in your hair on the right-hand side, it's on your right-hand side. You're not having to you look like a crazy person here when you're trying to get fluff out of your hair or whatever it is you're trying to do. And then view outside of frame. So when you're taking a picture, if you look at the camera, you'll see that there's a square in the middle. And then there's black on the left and the right where all the menu buttons are. That's like if you're looking at this now, you can see here in the middle is where you're seeing a camera, but there's actually, when you choose to use outside of frame, what even's outside in that black area will be in your final photo, and then you can crop it and edit it accordingly. If you don't want that and you only want the photo in the middle, then you can toggle that off and you'll only get that. You won't get the widescreen feel, you'll get the more moderate center of the camera. And in the photo capture is to prioritize for faster shooting. So let's say that I am trying to take, I'm not using burst, but I'm taking a bunch of photos quickly with my phone using the toggle button or either the shutter button on the screen or the volume down button. If I hit the button very quickly, if this is turned to on, if this is toggled green, the phone will just keep taking photos, and what they'll do is just make them smaller and less detailed because you're pushing that button repeatedly. They're trying to get all the pictures and not miss every time you command it to take a picture. If that is off, you're going to miss some photos because you have to wait for it to finish rendering what you took in order to take the next one. So that, I think that one's better to be off because that gives me more control. The trade-off is lower quality photos if I'm taking a lot at the same time. All right, so now the next part here, like I said, I pre-recorded this because I didn't want any malfunction. So this is actually a video of some of the things that I've alluded to and some of the features and how to use your camera that I took earlier. So if you have questions, you can put them in. I'm sorry, I cut myself off. You can put them in the chat while the video is playing.
All right, so the first setting that we're going to work on is going to be the portrait mode, which is everybody's favorite mode. This is the mode that you find taking selfies in or taking some macros and works very, very well. And you'll notice that I have the 3 grids up and I have these square that's moving around my face here, and it reads natural lighting at the bottom, and so those are the default settings. What I want to do is go through very quickly and show you the different buttons here, and for the purposes of this, because it's a training video and I want my hands free to hit buttons and stuff, I am using a tripod. It's not necessary. There's a good stabilizer in the iPhone. So when I am taking selfies, for example, I wouldn't be looking for stabilization. I wouldn't have to worry about having that on a tripod. When I'm taking photos outside, I might, but most of the time, for the context of the class we're talking about now, we're talking about storytelling on the go. You're not going to be whipping out a tripod stuff. So, all right, so when we look on the screen, I have got this in landscape mode instead of portrait. So portrait will be up, landscape will be across. And in landscape mode, you'll look at the top left-hand corner and you see there's an F with a circle around it. And the F with the circle around it is going to give us the ability to change our focus point and basically the softness of the background. So I'm going to be the subject here. I'm what the picture is being taken of. And so I'm going to tap on my face. And when I tap on my face, you can see the square gets smaller. It now zeroes in on what I'm going to be recording. And I can then adjust my finger to the right of that square where you see the little sun to make the room lighter or darker. And so I'm going to give a little bit of depth there. And now that I've hit the F in the top left-hand corner, you'll notice that this bar in the right hand shows up. And when I scroll that up or down, it actually will soft focus or change the focus point for me to make the background more blurred, give that more depth feel that we talked about earlier. And so I'm going to hit that. So I'm the focus. I got my lighting set, and I can use the F for the focus to change the f-stop of the lens and tell me again how clear my subject is, which in this case is me, and then how the background isn't. Underneath of that F, you'll see that little caret, little arrow, and when you click that, it pops up a series of menu items on the right here, right above your shutter button, or right next to your shutter button. And I'm going to go through those now. So at the very bottom, you're going to see that there is a flash with a line through it. I don't use flash hardly ever when I'm taking photos on my iPhone. And so I have disabled that. You can do that by default. We talked about settings earlier in the session. And then down here, you'll see on the left-hand side in the bottom corner, there is also a button to be able to control your flash. You can quickly turn the flash on or off for your photos. Back to the right, you can see that there's the flash with the line through it. Over top of that, there's a plus and minus. When you click that, that's actually changing the amount of light exposure allowed in the screen, in the camera. And so if you're seeing like this is very, very dark and I want to lighten it up a little bit, I can there. Do remember that you're going to have the option. You want some good balanced light, white light, but you're going to be able to edit this later in Lightroom or whatever app you're using. And so I'm just going to make that a little bit there. The next button up over the plus minus for the lighting is going to be the timer. So either 3 seconds or 10 seconds delay. So if I put that on 3 seconds, I hit the shutter button, it'll count down to 3 and then take my photo. This is good if you're trying to set the camera and then take off to go get the picture, you know, because you want to take an action shot back here and you want to use a timer to give you the 3 to 10 seconds to get there. If you're an Apple Watch user, there's also a shutter button on your thumb or your watch rather, so you can hit that on your watch when you're in place, and it also has a 3 to 10 second timer on it. And then over top of that, I don't ever use this. This is pre-applying a filter. You can see that I can go through the filters here. It'll tell me what it looks like. I just take that picture as it is, and then go from there. And then over top of that again is the f-stop. That's the focus point here. So I want a little bit of fuzziness in the background, and then that's it. And then you can see that to the right of that F is the circle that rotates the camera from either the front camera or the back camera. And right now we're selfie mode. I'm using the front camera, and so then there's the shutter button. And so if I had put a timer on there 3 seconds, I'm gonna go put a timer at 3 seconds and hit the shutter button. It's gonna count down 2, 3, 1 and I take my photo, and then I can go back and I can turn that off, and it'll stay on until you close the app and whatever last settings you had there. Now, going back to the left of the camera, I'm going to click that arrow or caret button again, and that is going to change and get rid of those settings. But if you notice now on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that it says F for 3.5. That's the f-stop. That's the 3.5 f-stop, tells you what the focus point is. Underneath of that, you can see a 0.3. That's my exposure or my lighting. And then underneath of that, you can see that the flash is still turned off. And I'm just going to take a picture now. And it takes the picture and it's processing in the background. And then you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, that little square is the picture that I took, and opens up iPhotos to go and grab that. The last thing I'll show you on the portrait mode is these little boxes here. And these little boxes here, when you close the other menu we're talking about, gives you some preset lightings. And so I'm in natural light, which is just whatever's in the room. And then you can see here that the next step over is studio light, which is supposed to give you, you can see it softens my face. I'm looking all soft now and blemish free. And the next one over is contour lighting, which is giving you, it's really focusing this light here right in the center of your subject or your face. And when I click on here, make some adjustments down, it'll still keep that contour lighting on my face. This one is just to, if you take a photo, if you're taking a really close photo, it'll blacken out. Now, for people like me, and again, I'm doing this for real estate agents, so we're an older group of people generally speaking. That whole professional actor model lighting, where you're getting all this black lighting like this. My white hair, my graying doesn't blend really well in there. I'm wearing a black t-shirt, so it looks a little weird to me. I'm not a big fan of it. I thought I would be when it first came out, but it doesn't work great for me. It might for other people, especially for those of you who still have color in your hair or color your hair, you know who you are, you put your makeup on, it'll look great for you. It doesn't work for a lot of people. So play with it. I mean, give it a shot and see what happens, and then go from there. And then you can scroll over here, and there is a black and white filter, and then there's a black and white focus filter. So those are, you can play with those and see if any of those work with you. They don't necessarily for me, but not a lot of stuff works for this. This is pretty basic. Yeah. So that is the portrait mode, and now we're going to go outside and look at the photo mode and the future features that they have there. Okay, so we are here now taking a picture of, well, a tire swing in the backyard, because this is what worked for me. That's a tire swing that my daughters asked me to set up and install for them, and I risked my life climbing up in a tree to do it, and they never used it more than once. But, That's parenting. So we're taking a picture here of a tire swing. And when you look at this, again, I've got my camera in landscape mode. Portrait mode would be simply rotating it up so that you get this picture. And in this case, my subject is the tire swing. I don't really want the pipes from the back of my house or my neighbor's house in the frame. So then this would probably be a better frame for this. But I want to first start you off with landscaping. And you can see I got my rule of nine, my rule of thirds here. And I'm going to move the camera a little bit so that that tree is in the left-hand quadrant there. Even though I want that tire really to be the subject of this photo, I'm just going to start with there. So I've got now my screen here, and just like the portrait mode I showed you, down here at the bottom, I changed from portrait mode. Portrait mode would be much more focused. This would still work for this particular photo, but I'm going to go to photo mode here. And we're going to go through some basics again. So on the left-hand side, you can see that there is a couple circles there with a line through it. And when I click on that, that turns on or off the live photo button. Now, when we went through the actual settings earlier in this program, I showed you how to turn off live photos. I am not a big fan of at all of live photos. Live photos actually takes about 3 to 5 seconds. I don't remember. I think it's 3 seconds of really more video than live. That's why somebody's text you a photo and you look at it, there's like this motion movement thing going on. I hate it. So I turn it off. It does have a benefit. There is a good feature for that I'll go over at the end of this. But for right now, I'm going to make sure that's always turned off. And again, in the bottom left-hand corner, I've turned off flash because I never ever shoot with flash. There are some times to do it, but not normally would I be using my iPhone for a moment that required a flash photo. And again, you play with that and decide what you like. That's just me. And so again, just like when we were doing the portrait mode, in the right-hand side, there's a circle with the two buttons that moves you between front and back cameras. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you see that little square. That is to get to iPhotos, where you have downloaded your photos and you can go see what you've done there. And then you can take your finger and move between the different photo and video functions. There's Pano, which we'll talk about in just a minute, Portrait, which we discussed just before this, and then I'm in my standard photo. In this particular program, just for length, we don't talk about video or slow-mo or all the rest. That will be a different program or class or video. All right, so now I'm in photo. Now, in the photo itself, you'll see there is a 2, a 1x, and a 0.5. If you'll notice in the back of your iPhone, if you have the newer iPhone, there are 3 cameras. Those are the 3 different lenses that iPhone uses to make a composite and blend into one solid photo. And so I can switch between those 3 lenses, and 0.5 means I'm zooming out, 1x is where I normally am. And then 2x is zooming in to my subject. And in this case, 2x is where I want to be because I'm really trying to get a picture of that tire swing. And so I'm going to go back to 1 just for our class. Now, you remember in the setting, I wanted to see things outside of the frame. So if you're looking at my screen now, you'll see to the right is my neighbor's corner of their house and their pool house. And then to the left, you'll see the back of my house and a little bit of the deck in the far left. What's graded out in black won't be in your photo unless you credit a setting for that. And so I still got my subject right there in the middle. Now I'm going to go into this left-hand side in the center. You're going to see that there is, again, that caret or that menu, and that opens up a couple other menu items. And some of these, 1 or 2 of these, you'll see that weren't in the portrait mode. And so again, starting in the bottom, you'll see the flash with the line through it. It says, I don't want flash. Over top of it is, again, a live auto on or off. I always want that off. Remember, if you set it in the camera settings to preserve your last settings, then if you turn the live photo off, it'll always be off. If you don't have that in your settings, then a live photo will be the default. I to this day can't understand why, but it will. Some people really like square photos, so we have 4.3 or 16 by 9. 16 by 9 gives you that rectangle feel. 4 by 3 is your more square photo, which is what people are normally accustomed to, or a ratio rather. And basically it's saying 4 parts across, 3 parts down. and then the square is just the square. And again, a lot of people like the square photo because it's perfect for Instagram. It fits right in there. You don't have to do a whole lot of editing or cropping. And so that would be where you'd want to go. I like 4x3. It gives you a little few more options. 16:9 if I'm doing a big landscape or big scene of something. But 4x3 is probably my default. And then you again see the plus or minus, so we can change the lighting absorption of the lens. So we're moving that lens a little more open to collect more lighting in our photo. And you can do whatever you feel is comfortable there. Again, we have a timer for 3 to 10 seconds. And then lastly, we have the filter. If you want to pre-apply a filter, I recommend that you don't. I think you just take the photo and then you can edit it, do post-editing in Lightroom if you want to. And so that's really it for the photo features. It's not super complicated, but you can take a bunch in different ways in order to get your photo to work just right. So I'm going to go down to 2 here. I'm going to go to change my settings from 4.3 to square because this is intended to go on Instagram. And then I'm just going to hit the shutter button, and there's my picture. And then I take my picture, and I can go to Lightroom and start editing it from there. So that's it. That's your photo. So right now, my neighbors are wondering why I'm standing in the middle of the yard spraying water out of the hose and taking a picture of it. But for you guys, I'm doing this. So this is a example of long exposure. So I'm going to be using, you use this for anything, lights and traffic or whatever. But I'm just going to squeeze the trigger here for the hose, and I can take a regular picture. And then you can see, it's okay. That's a regular picture. When I have live on, and this is really the only reason why I would use live, is I can push up on the photo and you can see that it creates some animation, or at the end, it creates a long exposure. And so now I can go ahead and show that long exposure, which looks a lot more attractive than just the water or the hose. And if I hold down on it, I can take a regular picture. If I hold the picture, you can see what it was before I made the edits. And that's just a smoother look. And so there's another example. This is just water coming out, but when I do this, you see the rainbow, you see this nice long exposure for the hose, and it's just more attractive. All right, so this is panoramic mode, and you can get there by just switching down at the bottom, taking your finger and swiping across. And you can see that there's a couple components here. There is the yellow line in the middle to keep you centered, the white arrow to keep you level, and then it's going to start. You can do left to right or right to left. I like doing left to right. This is particularly good if you've got a big field or big area that you're trying to capture. I used it recently for a baseball stadium. I've used it for farmland, anything like that. So you don't have to take it the full width. And I think a lot of people get frustrated with this because it does make like this fisheye thing. If you do the whole thing, you can do it just the area you need it. And so I'm going to go ahead and click the shutter button, and it just starts. I don't have to hold the shutter button down. It just starts. I capture what I want, and notice that the white arrow tells me when I'm in line with the yellow line to keep me on track, and if I'm not, or if I go too fast, the phone will tell me. The other benefit to this is not just for doing landscaping, but also if I want to do like low angle for a big building or something like that. This is particularly good. So I'm going to go to landscape mode where I start at the bottom of this particular tree. I click the shutter button, and I'm going to be able to climb up the tree this way. And I hit the shutter button and stop. And you can see now I've got this very full picture of the tree that I would never have gotten from that camera without using the panoramic mode. And now you can see how big and beautiful that particular tree is, just like you could a big building or tall, anything you're looking at that's big. So big fan of the pano mode. It's very user-friendly, it's very forgiving, and it's very functional.
All right. So for those who were watching, I saw some of you trying to do it while watching the video, which means you forgot the next step or didn't see the next thing. So I put a link in the subject line, for the video that you just watched so you can go back and play it again and pause it and try those things. Is there a feature? So someone direct messaged me about some of these features on iPhone 7, and then Carol text or message, is there a feature on iPhone 8 to take off the live setting? Also, is there a long exposure for 8? I don't think so. I think iPhone 10 is where the 3 lenses came in, and that gave it some of these features that you won't get unless you have a 10, 11, or now 12. Me personally, I'm usually about one phone behind. So I'm on 11 right now, and 13 is coming out next month. So I'm waiting to see if that anything that I really need on there. Justify, I guess, for buying it. But you really need 10 or better nowadays to get any of these features out of it. Those have the multiple lenses, and if you're using this for a lot of video or phone, you're going to want to get the Pro version of the phone, which has the third lens and faster processing and some other things on there. So unfortunately, it doesn't help you turn it off in 8 or 7 or fully use the features. But again, 10 is where you start seeing the magic happen. So post editing, and I'll just wrap up with this. I use Adobe Lightroom as my post editing app. It is free. It is for me. It is one of the sorry, somebody's messing with me in the chat. As sponsored by Apple. Yes, you all need to go and upgrade your phones. I can't believe they haven't just spontaneously fallen apart. Mine always seem to fall apart right after the new one's announced. Let's see. Live option is good for making a key photo edit. Is that only for the iPhone 12? No, that actually started coming out in the 10 as well. That should be in the feature that you can use in 10. It's not just a 12. I don't have a 12. So everything you saw me do there is actually an 11 Pro. And I'm pretty sure you can do most all of that in 10, definitely in 11 and 12. Anyway, sorry. So the Adobe Lightroom is a free app. It is very, very, very easy to use. If you are an Adobe subscriber, there's a few extra features, but you don't really need them. Adobe gives you the highest source control. I've embedded a video on the link I gave you to my website earlier that goes through why I like it. It's where some of the filters are, some of the cropping and editing and balancing and changing stuff around. There are other apps out there. I know there's a lot of apps that people like for photo editing. Find the one that fits you. But most of your editing should not be done in the Apple iPhoto or in the photo app. And post editing fix all the problems you may have had taking the photo. So again, you're not going to do pinching and stuff like that anymore on your phone. You can go into the editing app and crop it to get what you wanted out of there. And that is it. So thank you guys so much for spending time with me today. Again, there are basically, of all those things I showed you, there's like 4 or 5 I use over and over and over again, and then the rest I use DSLR or something else for that. But this should be enough to help you with the photos, telling elements of your phone, gathering the right content, having a plan for, again, showing you're involved in the community, showing what's going on in your life, and being able to promote yourself through connection and social connectors out there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You guys all know how to get a hold of me, and I want to thank you for your time. Oh, do you have any questions now? I can open up for a few questions before we break for the day.